Hello.
Good evening.
Hi, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
I can't hear you.
Yes, hi. Thanks, Professor Atkins, for joining me today. Sorry, can you hear me again? I think there's internet connection. Can you hear me now? Everything okay? Uh,
1, 2, 3, 4.
can you hear me?
Yeah, I
Yep,
can now.
yep. All right, thanks so much for joining me today, Professor Atkins. So, my name is Fadi. I'm 22 years old. I'm a psychology student in Latrobe University in Australia, Melbourne. So I recently started my YouTube channel to discuss through science, faith, and those big questions. Recently, I met Dan Barker, who's Freedom from Religion Foundation, and we had a discussion about these things, some of those things, and I thought I would also invite you to join me today, since you're in the chemistry field and you've discussed through some topics with John Lennox, which I saw it, and I thought I would start off by so today we're gonna just talk about science and philosophy, free will and human nature, religion and meaning, and future legacy. So to start off, I want to ask you, um, if you were to choose today about your belief system or worldview, um, would you like to say you're a more scientist, philosopher, atheist more? Or since you talked to John Lennox and I think you talked to William Lane Craig, so how do you define yourself now since you talked to
Well,
some people?
intellectually, I've been brought up as a scientist, and my, as it were, philosophical position is that of atheist.
Mm, okay. So you've mentioned about in science can explain everything. Um, I suppose I wanted to ask you, first of all, what do you mean by everything? And there any limits that science will never cross?
Well, no, I think what I mean by everything is everything that there is evidence for.
Mm,
So there are things for which people believe in, for which there is no evidence,
mm,
such as life after death. Um, so science needn't trouble with trying to explain things for which there is no evidence. There are two things for which there is irrefutable evidence. One is that the universe exists,
mm,
and the other is that we are aware of it. So I think there are two major questions for science. One is how the universe came into existence,
mm,
and the other is um, how what is the nature of consciousness, and can we explain it? And I think those two major scientific questions have two very distinct types of answer, or will have in due course. The origin of the universe will be based on uh, some kind of mathematical theory of the fabric of reality.
mm,
And the nature of consciousness will be based on some kind of simulation of it. Not there won't be although there might be something equivalent to um, an equation for the answer, how did it come into existence? The, um, the answer to the nature of consciousness will be an entirely different qualitative kind, that we shall create machines that are consciousness in some recognizable sense.
Mm. When I watched your discussion with, so do you want to add something else?
No, it's okay.
Yeah. When I watched your discussion with John Lennox, and I suppose correct me if I'm wrong, but do you believe that the universe has had begun with nothing, or it has a beginning right now after discussing it, or maybe your worldview changed?
Yeah. Um, it might sound rather foolish, but think there is currently nothing here now.
Mm,
So, what happened at the inception of the universe, in my view, is that absolutely nothing changed into net nothing, in the sense that, let me illustrate that in a very simple example. We know that there is electric charge in the
mm,
universe, that there's positive and negative charge. We also know experimentally, observationally, that there is the same amount of positive and negative charge. So the amount, whereas before the universe came into existence, there was no electric charge. Now, now that the universe exists, there is an equal amount of opposite charge. So,
mm,
in effect, there is still no charge, no net charge. And I think you can extend that to other entities that we take as defining the universe. Um, so, in my view, before the universe came into existence, there was absolutely nothing. Now, there is still absolutely nothing, but it's a much more interesting form of nothing.
mm,
I think what that represents, if I may say so, is that people who try to explain the uh, incipience of the universe, its coming into existence, um, originally in the early days, that is until 2024 or thereabouts, had to account for um, something coming from nothing, and that's a really um, big problem. If you came into a forest and you found suddenly a big heap of earth, where did it come from?
mm,
Uh, but my view is that there is still net nothing. So what science has to explain is how absolutely nothing reconstructed itself into this more interesting form of net nothing. It's like going back to that analogy. It's like coming into a forest and finding not only a heap of earth, but a hole beside it. So it's much easier to explain if you've got a heap next to a hole. So um, what science does, I think, is edge towards simplifying the questions that require answering.
mm. I suppose a lot of people have asked in this between science and philosophy about consciousness. Uh, can we fully explain um that by chemistry and physics, or will it always remain a mystery? Or
Well,
has that been a mystery?
it's certainly not going to be a mystery. I think it's only philosophers who think it's a mystery. But we
Mm,
know that philosophers are pessimists. Um, we are constantly holding up warning signs that we will never understand. It's a branch of theology, really. Um, we scientists just get down to the business of explaining things. And as I said before, I think that the explanation of um, consciousness will be its simulation in some kind of computer, um, perhaps a quantum computer, I don't know, some kind of computer. The question will be whether the consciousness of the entity that we create, and for which we'll have interesting conversations and get interesting insights from, is the same as our consciousness. Now, our consciousness is really centered in the brain, and the brain is full of uh, synapses, but it's also pervaded by chemicals, by hormones, and so on. And it also, the structure of our brains also represent our evolutionary history, our ethological history, if you like. And so our brains are constructed on the basis of our evolutionary history and respond to the chemical composition that happens to be flooding through our brains when we're thinking. Now,
Mm,
whether a machine will be able to emulate both our evolutionary history and the implications for the structure of our brains, and will be able to emulate the role of the hormones, the endocrines that pervade it, is an open question. So we'll have these apparently conscious machines, and and although there will be no longer a question about whether we have emulated consciousness, what will remain is how that mechanical consciousness, that artificial consciousness, um, uh, differs or is the same as organic consciousness.
mm. You mentioned evolution, and it's something that we all have really like if I talk to someone as a Christian, it would say, "Oh, evolution never has proven science never proved evolution." I suppose um a lot of
What do you
people
mean by
struggle
that?
with yeah,
What,
sorry. A lot of people
what
will
do you mean
struggle with the
by
definition of
what do you
yeah.
mean by science has never proved evolution?
People would say, like, for instance, the definition of evolution, they would struggle to understand that from a science perspective.
I
How
don't
would you
mind.
explain evolution?
I don't mind if people find concepts difficult to explain, to understand. I mean, the difference between religion and science, one of the differences is
Mm,
that religion is easy and science is difficult. Religion, all you have to do is to accept what you're told,
mm,
and that's it. Life after death. Oh, that's good. I look forward to that. Um, Whereas science normally, a scientific explanation normally entails grappling with a sequence, a concatenation of, of arguments. And many people find it not possible to follow an argument from a beginning to end, especially if it involves concepts that are alien to the way that they've been brought up. Science is difficult. That's why it's so good. Religion is easy. That's why it's
mm,
so bad. As to evolution, you assert that there's no evidence for evolution. That is absolute nonsense. Of course,
mm,
there's a huge amount of evidence of two kinds. One is the the history of fossils, uh, uh, the ability to trace the emergence and disappearance of species by digging up the past, looking at it. And the second, another entirely different stream is molecular evolution, where quite distinct from digging up the past. What we do is to dig up the present in terms of our molecular ancestry.
Mm,
And the, the fossil record and the molecular record have never been in conflict. So you have these two great streams of evidence, and um, they are not in conflict. They are co-supportive. So there is plenty of evidence for evolution, and people who deny it are simply wrong in that sense. I suppose there's another thread to that. Um, one famous biochemist once said that there is nothing in biology that cannot be understood except in terms of evolution. Evolution is the key to understanding biology.
mm. We'll move on to free will and human nature. Um, I've read Sam Harris' book about free will, and he thinks that free will is an illusion, because of some creative physical process. Now the question is like, I mean, because he brought up two cases in his book, and that because of two crimes has done the crimes, and at the end they were interviewed, they were never at that time consciousness when they being interviewed to being asked a question. And he thinks that kind of way of not being able to, that you chose that time, makes it an illusion. What's your response of free will? And I mean, is there any room, genuine choice from a material universe of free will?
Um, Depends what you mean by free will, of course. I mean, that's a typical philosopher's answer. Um, let's take it at its simplest, which is always, I think, a sensible place to start.
Mm,
Um, that if free will is the predictability of an action by an individual, then no, on the whole, except in the broadest possible way, we can't predict output from input uh, in a particular individual case. The brain is um, such a complex instrument that it's not like a piano where pressing one key predicts a particular
mm,
musical outcome. Pressing a metaphorical key in a brain leads to a largely unpredictable outcome. Of course, we can make some sort of general predictions because we know that people have particular personalities and are likely to respond in different ways to different kinds of stimuli. Um, but a detail about whether someone will respond by going out and committing a crime or not going out and committing a crime, and which particular crime is 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 too far beyond the horizon of predictability. So the brain is a complex place. It doesn't respond only to external inputs. It responds also to internal inputs,
mm,
such as the endocrine system, the a thought that we might have triggering other thoughts in this complex uh, reticulation of neurons. So, yes, we have free will in a certain sense. We certainly don't have predestination, which is the abnegation of free will.
mm. Um, what about like how do you reconcile human creativity, love, and morality with only a lot of people will argue like Frank Turk, the standard, and we're gonna move on soon to religion perspective, but we're talking about just the standard of moral standard and love and thing.
Yeah, well, morality is uh, to understand morality, you need to understand our ethological history. Um, in short, we are social animals who have found ways for not only ourselves but our societies to uh, to survive. And so I mean, it's you strike you. Uh, I'll do unto you as I hope you will do unto me. That is really morality. There's no
Mm,
absolute morality, but there is pragmatic morality, which has got hardwired into our mode of living.
mm. We'll move on to religion and meaning. I guess I know you often debated people with religion like John Lennox. Is there any do you think why do you think there is so many people resist the scientific worldview more of explanation to better explanation when presented with strong evidence rather they prefer I think you mentioned that maybe people would find it easy to accept religion and they will because the sciences are complex. Is there any other way? Like, is there any other reason why they would
Yeah,
reject science?
I mean, there's lots of reasons. I mean, religion provides comfort, false comfort. It offers you um, eternal life in a state of bliss. Who can resist? Especially
Mm,
if you are a poor peasant ground down by the system. To think that you're going to get your own back on these aristocrats in the afterlife is very compelling. It also sort of just religion also controls, and it's the supreme weapon of control that it infiltrates human minds through giving false expectations. Um, it promises you hell if you misbehave, and it promises you heaven if you're nice. Um, uh, you know, it's a supreme comforter. It's
mm,
also a wonderful propagandist. It's found art as um, as its weapon. Uh, it's taken over, painting, sculpture, music, and it really does know how to effectively hypnotize people and uh, and uh, and give them a false sense of contentment. Now, it may be that for many who are suffering in this one and only life, then false expectation, expecting comfort and bliss forever after, is is um, is a palliative, and it helps them get through the daily grind. So, but I'm taking the stern view that you shouldn't lie to people. Religion lies. Um, so
mm,
um, I can see that lying is sometimes kind, uh, but uh, but when you stand back, I think it's uh, fundamentally wrong to lie.
Mm. What
Now,
about,
you might
yeah,
say
sorry.
that someone like the Pope um, doesn't know that he's lying.
Mm,
That might well be true, uh, but lying he is.
mm. So you would say that religion is an illusion for some people and or ultimately harmful for humanity progress. Which one would be more? Is that you would argue that religion is an illusion?
Yeah, well, look at the wars around the world and count the local disputes as well that can all be traced to um, religion.
Mm,
I mean, economics come into it, but religion and economics are entwined. Um, that the trouble with religion being irrational is hard to displace by a rational argument. Uh, the only way that you can eliminate it's not quite true. The most effective way of eliminating um, religion is to kill the believer and to wipe out the brain that contains the concepts that we refer to as religious. Now, I'm not advocating that. Don't think that I'm advocating we should kill. But when you look around and you look at war and you look at disputes
mm,
around the world, many of them are driven by the need to eliminate someone who does not hold the same beliefs as you.
mm. What,
Science, after all, if I want to find more uh, counterpoints between
mm,
religion and science, science is universal. It's it's fundamentally a force for good. It's fundamentally a force for reconciliation. Now, of course, it brings in its wake weapons of destruction, but that is not the point of science. The point of science is to achieve understanding. And the difference between science and religion is that whereas religion knows that it's right, and that view is very hard to displace, science knows that it's wrong. It's forever reinventing itself. It's forever groping in the darkness of misunderstanding and finding deeper understanding. It knows that it has to discard what we now regard as an explanation, and in order to achieve a deeper understanding. Well, religion got it right. Religion knows it's right, and that's why it's so hard to displace. It's religion's self-confidence that it's right, even though it's really seeking after social balm, uh, seeking after comfort, seeking after some kind of way of organizing your life, a way of providing comfort. Science is not in the business of providing comfort. Science is in the business of finding truth.
mm. We've got about 5 minutes. Do you want to keep going a little bit more? Is that okay? Or yep, no worries. So, I want to just ask one more question, and then we move on to the future and legacy. So, what is the strongest argument you've ever heard from a religious believer, and why do you still find it um unconvincing?
I've never heard a convincing argument. I mean, it's pie in the sky. It's all assertion, prejudice, and the fear of personal annihilation. Um, um, I suppose, um, I mean, one of those two questions that I mentioned earlier in this talk, um, the inception of the universe, uh, people will say it's an easy explanation. God did it. What a powerful explanation that is. What an empty explanation, too. So,
Mm.
um, all religious explanations are empty. I think, putting it more insultingly, um, no theologian has ever said anything worth listening to.
So, I know that you, a lot of people would say, I'll just put one that, like about Jesus' resurrection. Is there any evidence for
No,
Jesus' resurrection?
none whatsoever.
Okay.
I think it's just a fantasy.
Okay. So, looking ahead about the discoveries of science, do you think we could completely change how we understand the universe or even life itself over the next 50 years?
Yes, I mean, this is a serious question. It's to do, once again, with those two great questions. Fundamentally, what is the fabric of reality? And um, and science is edging. Science has done all the easy stuff. Um, uh, it's it's identified the elements. It's identified fundamental particles. It's identified some aspects of the fundamental laws of nature, quantum theory, general relativity.
Mm,
Um, uh, it will almost certainly undergo another huge paradigm shift when everything falls into place and we shall understand the world more deeply. And science is edging towards it. It can't it's such an important question that it can't rush. And the further we get into unraveling or discovering the fabric of reality, let's call it that, the harder the questions get, um, and the more upsetting to our understanding and comprehension they become. Take quantum theory.
mm,
It's a major upset of classical physics, and still hard to comprehend because our brains were brought up in the farmyard and the jungle and to grapple with ideas that transcend these classical expectations of the world is really difficult. It may be that we'll never comprehend, that we'll be able to do the equations, solve the equations, but won't really deeply inside ourselves really understand. Um, so um, science will make progress, and the progress will become slower and slower. I hope it doesn't become asymptotically uh, stationary and never getting there. Um, but that's the difference between me and philosophers. Um, Scientists are optimists, philosophers are pessimists.
mm. Um, bring on to maybe a final comment. I know that we a bit um you respect to half an hour. Is there anything that you would want to just leave out some message to people for the next generation or for science thinkers would be?
Um, I, I, I suppose I urge people to enjoy, and that's a very broad term. Enjoy can involve helping other people, not just selfish joy. Um, to enjoy this one and only life, and in particular, to enjoy the deepening of delight that comes through ever increasing scientific understanding. The world fundamentally is rational. We should never let go of that. Don't be seduced by false promise. And carpe diem.
Mm. So would you say that to finalize this, like there is a meaning of life
No,
in life?
no, there's no meaning for life. Evolutionary, we're lucky consequences of evolution. And
Mm.
if there's time for the world to survive, which there might not be, we're a part of that ongoing evolution.
Okay, all right. I guess that's most of my I thought interview questions. I thought if you wanna, is there any question you wanna ask me before we finalize
No,
things?
I think not. I let people um, enjoy your conversations, but good for you for probing people like this.
Yes, thank you so much for being here today, Professor Atkins.
My pleasure.
I'd like to thanks again, and we'll keep in touch and see what happens.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Goodbye.
you. Okay, bye bye.